for thoughts and watching me grow to be you.
Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mira and today I will be talking about books. So the first thing I want to say though is that I want to thank the 200 of you who subscribe to my channel. I actually feel so flattered that there are so many people out there actually enjoy just like my daily life and me yapping about the things I love. It feels so personal because I'm someone who have very hard time making friends and keeping relationship in real life. And here I just feel like I have this small communities of people all around the world who enjoy listening to me and getting to know me. So even though 200 subscriber is literally nothing compared to so many YouTubers and influencers out there, it still means the world to me. So thank you. Anyways, I know that I'm a little bit late to the party, but this is a reading grab up for all the books that I've been reading since the beginning of 2025. So I'll start with what I read in March and then work my way backwards to February and January. So let's get this party started. So the last book I read in March is Just Kids by Patti Smith, and I've mentioned it briefly in one of my videos before that I think this book is going to be in my top 10 favorite of 2025. Now that I finished it, I can totally confirm that it is true. At first, when I read the book, I thought it's just a love story between Patti Smith and Robert Mapplethorpe. But then, as the story unraveled, I realized that it's really about how this relationship impact on her as an artist and as a person. Her writing feels very subtle and organic in a way that you feels like you in her skin and you experience what she's experiencing. This is something that not a lot of authors could do, especially when it comes to memoirs. Personally, when I read memoirs, I feel very detached because this is someone real life. But with this book, I actually see through her lenses, and that was incredible, hands down. I would say that the most prominent thing about her writing is the way she writes about people. It makes me feel like I'm actually knows them in real life too. She doesn't just describe how they look, she describes how they move, she describes how she feels around them. And she gives you the energy of the moment instead of just like mere fact of it. But beyond that, there is something that hitting me personally about this book. Well, if you don't know, I am Vietnamese and I was born and raised in Vietnam. I only came to Canada roughly about 7 years ago. So this book was taking place during the time that the Vietnam War was happening, and I think all of us knows how horrifying the Vietnam War was. My parents were actually born around that time and they was growing up during the war. So even though I didn't grow up during that time, thank God, I know from their story that there was so many times that they were very close to death. And if they didn't make it, obviously I wouldn't be here today. So it feels weird. While Patti Smith and Robert was discovering their art and their identity and their queerness, well, people in Vietnam, including my family, was trying to survive. And the thing is, decades later, I am the one who have that freedom to make art and to discovering myself and my sexualities. And then we have people from another side of the world who literally fighting for their life. Right at this moment, I'm sitting here talking to you guys about books. But the thing is, we can only experience our own lives and the lives that we are living. So every other painful story just feels very distant to us, no matter how much we read about it or heard about it. It's still something that we can't reach. And so yeah, that's what I think about Just Kids, and it really did give me a lot. So the next book I read is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. So of course, this is apparently something that a lot of people read in March because it's the newest release of the Hunger Games. It's something that we all been looking for. It's still pretty new, so I'll make sure that I won't include any spoilers in this video. However, if you are too scared and want to start completely fresh, then I would put like the time slot and you should just skip this part. So this book is the 5th book in the Hunger Games universe and the second prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. It's focusing on Hamish Abernathy's Quarter Quell game. So it took place 24 years prior to Katniss and Peeta's game. And you guys are not ready for whatever in this thing. The writing is very accessible and it's immediately pulled me in. Like, I could not put this book down until the game started. Suzanne Collins was not kidding at all when she was writing this. is so much darker, so much more violent and emotionally damaged. Like, even though all of us knew how it's gonna end, it's not make anything easier. It's just make things a lot harder. I'm telling you. Let's just say, like, after reading this book, you guys gonna see the original Hunger Games sounds like a child play, and it's kind of ironic because it is a bunch of children putting in just like this arena to fight to death as a game. Yeah. What stood out to me the most was definitely how Haymitch's characters developed through this book. You can finally understand him. Like his drinking, his distance, his survival instinct, it all makes sense. It also filled the emotional gaps that we have from the original series, so it's very devastating and necessary at the same time. Okay, so across this book, you're gonna see a lot of name dropping. And to be honest, I have a mixed feelings about it. Like sometimes it does feel a little bit too convenient, but at the same time, I do enjoy it. It does give you a clearer pictures of how the rebellions were forming in the background before it's actually on the surface. And I finally have my favorite characters from this series, Maisie Donners. Well, I need to talk about her. I don't know if this considers spoilers, but she was a diva. She stands out, and every time she's appear, like it's like she's so sassy, she's bold, she's sharp, she's strong, and she's actually very kind, even though she always put on this persona of being a very mean person. But deep down inside, she cares about people. Like she's genuinely cares about people. Like we all know that Katniss care about rules, and we also know that Haymitch care about a certain characters from this book. But Maisie Donners, she cares about pretty much everyone except for the careers. Anyways, all I have to say is her presence gives this book its soul, and losing her was very hard. Very hard. Do I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely. Like, I can't wait what Suzanne Collins write next, and I'll be reading anything she's putting out there after this. But I have to say, this is not a standalone story, so if you haven't read the original trilogy, you must read it before you starting this book. So yeah. Moving on to The Lovely Bone by Alice Sebold. I actually have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I actually got this book all the way back in 2016, but I only read one chapter and it was too much for me at that age. It still is at this age, if I'm being honest. Lots of trigger warnings, I would say.
Saoirse Ronan is pronounced Saoirse Ronan, like Saoirse.
Ronans. I first came across this story through the film adaptation starring Saoirse Ronans, and it haunted the hell out of me because I was only 11 years old. However, I do appreciate that I watched it back then. Otherwise, I wouldn't be aware of the dangers of men. So let's get into the book. The book is narrated by a 14-year-old girl who was violently taken away from the world. And then she watches over the people she loves and anyone who connected to her story from a place in between heavens and earth. What stood out to me the most about this book is definitely the way it lingers on the emotional aftermath. Like, it's not just about grief. It's about how grief factors people differently. There's just like some random thing that I noticed is the way her mom reacts to her death was literally an air sign, and then her dad was definitely a water sign. I don't know, it's just a random fact. So let me know if you agree on that. Some of the most powerful parts for me was definitely all the moments with her father. Just the way that he holds on to her memory and how he was such an emotional wreck, yet he's still trying to put himself together to be there for his other child, when his wife just completely detached from everything and take a leave. There was one particular scene in this book that involving a piece of her clothes and her brother and her dad that truly shattered me. Like, everyone's pain in the scene was so valid, and even though they clash each other's, there's just no way to resolve it. Pain is pain, and it's just so heartbreaking. Now on to the things that I struggle with when reading this book. There are moments that the writing was very confusing and oddly phrased. Let's just say the description tried really hard to be poetic, but end up being very hard to visualize. I'll just read you something as an example. Okay. That feeling that feeling curling into his stomach like eggs being folded into a bowl. That's just weird. Basically, he's talked about his anxiety of being caught. Okay, let's just reading the full sentence, okay? Getting caught became another moment in his life that brought fear. That sick feeling curling into his stomach like eggs being folded into a bowl. I don't even know what that means. Do you guess what I mean? It's just weird. It's just weird. Okay, there was another one where she just described, I don't remember where that is, but basically she just described that her eyes look like ferocious olives or something. And there are a lot of scenes that include sexual details that felt very uncomfortable and unnecessary, especially given the context of this book. So those things definitely pulled me out a lot more than once when I was reading this book. And then towards the end, there was also a particular scene that I would say crossed the boundary. Without spoiling anything, I would just say it's a major moment involving consent. Even though with the supernatural, it still didn't sit right with me. It felt wrong, and not just morally, but also structurally. And because of that scene, it just undermined so much of what our characters went through and fighting for this entire book. So that scene alone already dropped my rating significantly. Do I recommend this book? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not too sure. Like, you can totally read it if you are curious, but it's not necessary. And then moving on to my February reads, I have two books, A Man Called Off and Devotion by Patti Smith. We have another Patti Smith, yay. So let's go over A Man Called Off first by Fredrik Backman. I really love this book. I cried so much reading this book, as well as watching the movie that's starring Tom Hanks. I haven't cried that hard over a story for a very, very long time. I don't even remember. But this one gave me that ugly, ugly bawling cry. Like, towards the end of this book, I was like completely sobbing and full on ugly cry. Like, you start off the story thinking, oh, it's just a grumpy old man. But then you realize that there are so much more to him than just being a grumpy old man. And even though I really love the movie adaptation with Tom Hanks, and I did cry watching that movie too, the book just unravels so much of his past and why he becomes this grumpy old man. Like, it wasn't just that simple. It's just not who he is. That how he was brought up, and that's the majorities of how men from that generation being brought up. So as the book go on, you just realize that of carrying so much in his heart, he truly have a big heart. Metaphorically and literally, apparently. He has so much love to offer, and he hated it, but it's him. It's who he is. Anyways, I think the main reason why this book hit me so hard is because it reminds me of my dad, and I think it reminds a lot of people of their dads too, because they are from that generation of men who are always quietly enduring and putting their emotion inside. They just full of unspoken love. You know, it's the kind of love that's shown in very small action instead of big words. That's what it is. So if you really need a good cry, or just like a reminder that people might be more than what they seem, read this. We got another book by Patti Smith, and this one called Devotion. Every book written by Patti Smith is just beautiful, but this one I would say has a different kind of quiet power to it. The book splits into two parts. The beginning and the end are reflective essays on why she writes, and the middle is the short story called Devotion. The story itself is very haunting. It's a sad, eerie story about a figure skater who's completely consumed by art. She's willing to give up everything, including the authority over her body, just so that she can keep skating. And then one day, she just met this older man who is a very possessive collector. He pretty much stalked her and then wanted to, having a sexual relationship with her. In return, he promised her that he can give her whatever she needs, which he did, But mind you, she's underage, so it's make this story even more disturbing. And then the story just takes a very dark turns, and why I enjoy it, I would say this is a very triggering theme, so you should be mindful going into it. But what really stayed with me is definitely Patti's writing on why she create. She captures perfectly something that every artist will understand. It's the need to create, and not as a choice, but more as a calling. For people like us, making art isn't optional. It's how we make sense of the world and how we process our information as well as our emotions. And honestly, it's just how we survive. But that's also mean we always live in doubt. We always ponder upon these questions of whether it's worth it, especially it often doesn't lead to money or recognitions, and people around us think that we are crazy for doing something so impractical. No one really understands why we do what we do. It's such a waste of time and energy. And for what? Even I questions myself all the time. Why am I doing this? Is this going to take me anywhere? And still, art is the only thing that makes my existence feel complete. It's the only way that I can express what lingers inside of me. So even though this is a very small book, it holds a lot of power, especially for anyone who is a creator. And I want to thank Patti Smith for writing this book because this is my go-to whenever I doubt myself. I only read this one book in January, but it was the book. The Passion According to GH by Clarice Lispector. So this book was a 2024 Christmas gift by a friend, someone who always recommends very incredible books to me. All of their recommendation has become a favorite, and this one was no exception. In fact, I'm pretty sure this book will be my #1 reads of 2025. Perhaps one of my most favorite of all time. Even though it's not really a long novel, it's under 200 pages, it still took me an entire month to finish. Not because it was slow, but because it was so dense and so intense and so philosophical that I have to pause and then reflect and then pause and reflect and then make tons of notes and then come back to it. It's really one of those books that you can't just consume. You have to sit with it. So the story follows this pretty successful sculptress named GH who experienced something transformative, almost spiritual, after an encounter with a cockroach in her maid's room. This is pretty interesting, right? But it's not so much about the plot as it is about what's happening inside her mind. It's a descent into the self, into everything we're trying not to look at. The writing is very hypnotic and strange in the best ways possible. It's really pull you into this like psychological and philosophical spiral and doesn't let you out easily. At times, I feel like I didn't understand what I was reading, but I also knew that it was doing something to me. I felt like I was being cracked open and then putting together over again. Reading this book is like reading your own subconscious thought on papers, and Clarice Lispector did something that no one else ever could. It's definitely not a book for everyone, but if you do find it at the right moment, it's gonna change something in you like it did in me. So yeah, this book is the first book that I ever rated 5 out of 5, if I'm being honest. Okay, so let's get into my spring TBR. Spring is definitely my favorite season of the year. But it's not just sunshine and flowers, it's also very uncertain and raw. It's the season where everything starts to change, but slowly and quietly. It's a time of reflections, of stretching into something new, but still carrying the same weight of what came before. So for this season, I picked 10 books to reflect that feelings. I know it's very ambitious given that I only have a month and a half left, and I only started like 2 books from this pile. It's no pressure though. It's just that I think these books would reflect the feelings of spring very well, given that it's about grief, memory, family, identity, and transformation. So let's get into it. First, we have Nice Guy with Exit Wounds and Time is a Mother by Ocean Vuong. I've been slowly reading both of these poetry collections since February, and to me, poetry is something that you cannot just rush through. You need time and space to sit with it. These 2 books feels like spring in the most intimate way. It's very fragile and reflective. So the context of these books exploring identity, loss and war, also love, queerness and memory. They are the kind of book that you return to when you need something gentle but devastating honest. And staying in that same emotional world, I also have On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is his most popular work, as I believe. and it has been on my TBR since 2024. In On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, Wung still carries the same lyrical tones and tenderness that he has in his poetries. However, it is in a form of a letter from a son to his illiterate mother. It's a deeply personal book, and it's full of things that can never be said between a mother and a son. Next, we have Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Do you guys see the theme I'm going for this season? Lots of Asian emotional damage. Crying in H Mart has been on my TBR list ever since it was released, and I'm finally ready for it. Like Wung's novel, it explores the complexity of being raised by an Asian mother. You know, the grief and the tensions and the expectation. Both of these books were written after the authors lost their mothers, so it's full of things that left unsaid. Switching from mothers to fathers, we have Fathers and Children by Ivan Turgenev. This is a Russian classic. It takes on generational conflict and clashing ideologies between parents and their children. This one is definitely more philosophical, but I think it's still very emotionally rich. It fits spring in that questioning way, like, you know, it's a season that nothing ever stays the same. We have another memoir centered on family, but this one is about surviving chaos and turning your story into power. In The Glass Castle, Jeanette Watts writes about what it's like to grow up with unstable parents and poverty. I think this book fits spring in the most raw and personal way, like she takes something from what hurt her and then planting something new from it. She grew up even though she was never really given the tools to do so. Where the Crow That Sings by Delia Owens. I actually got this book all the way back in 2022, and I already promised myself that I'm gonna read it this year, so it's gonna be on my TBR nonetheless. However, I already watched the movie, and I think the tone just fits spring perfectly because it's very quiet and lonely and very slow burning. Anyway, so this story follows a girl named Kaya, and she grew up pretty much by herself because her family abandoned her at a very, very young age. So it's very tragic, and she just like completely isolated by everyone from that small town of North Carolina. She then builds a life by herself with nature, and she's super smart and talented, but then she got in this like very messy scandal. It wasn't because of her though. I do hear a lot of criticism on the writing of this book, but I still want to read it and judge it for myself, so yeah. Next, I have a graphic novel called Grass by Kim Suk Genji Kim. I actually got this book for a university class last year, but I never actually read it properly. It's a book based on a true story of comfort women during World War II, and it happened in a lot of countries, including Korea. So this book is extremely heavy. It's really about traumas and also remembrance. I think it fits spring in a way that it forces you to sit with this very discomforting truth. Violence against women is nothing new. It doesn't just happen during war, it's happening now. And we still have countries that going on wars, and obviously women are the easiest targets as well as children. Lots of these comfort women were actually teenage girls. The youngest one was around 15, so yeah, if you guys want to learn more about comfort women, this is the book that you definitely should go for. I saved the last two of my favorite book as the end. This is Children of the Albatross by Anais Nin and Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. I'll go over this book first. So this book is the second volume of Anais Nin continuous novel called Cities of the Interior. I already finished the first one, which is Ladder to Fire last year, and it felt like reading my own diary, so I had to take a break. However, I am ready for the next one. I really love Anais Nin, by the way. There are 5 books in total in this series. However, you don't really have to read them in orders because Anais Nin writing is the stream of consciousness and it's very surreal. Yet, I am still reading them in orders because I am type A, but you don't have to. You know, when I finished The Passion According to GH, I was just like, how am I going to be able to read again? Because nothing will ever feel the same. And then I realized that she has a bunch of other books, so I ordered them all. So apparently this is her first novel, and I think it fits spring perfectly, although I'm not sure if I'm actually will be able to get into it. It's just because when I read The Passion According to GH, it took me a month, so I feel like I need to devote it another month to read this book. I don't want to rush through any Lispector's book. Like, it's something that I want to sit with for the longest time as I could and just devouring it. Even if I can't read it in spring, I'm sure we'll leave it for June because it's my birthday month, so I will definitely treat myself to read some Clarice Lispector books, and even if it's just one book. So yeah. The cover is just so beautiful, by the way. Like, Okay, so that's a wrap up. I actually have something to confess to you guys, that I have not touched any book from my TBR list. But I read something else. I know, you are probably thinking, Mira, what are all of these informations for if you are not actually reading any of the books on the spring list? I know, sorry, but this is like, you know, things happens. And so I'm gonna give you a little bit updates of what I've been reading this April. I read 2 short books, which is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman and The Mick One by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Both of them are very short, so I read it in one sitting. I also finished Difficult Woman, and I'm currently reading In the Eye of the Wild by Natasha Martins. I have no idea how to pronounce her names. So I'm so sorry that I did not do anything that I said before, but I pray for your forgiveness, and yeah. Anyways, let's put that aside and let me know in the comments what books are you reading this spring, or what books makes you feel like spring. I love recommendations and I love you guys, so I trust you. And thank you for being here. I hope to see you all in my next video, and I promise I will try to post weekly. I know I've been very bad with it. I still need to get around this thing, you know, balancing my life and then filming it. But thank you so much for being my supporters. I love you guys. I love you guys so much. I don't know if it's too soon to say, but you guys are the bestest friend I ever had. Thank you. Thank you so much.